Hello and welcome to our podcast on quote integration and you. This is the first of a multi-part series that is designed to try and help students figure out when they need to cite their sources and then how to do that, both internally and in a works cited page type thing. So let's go ahead and get started and see exactly what we're talking about. So what exactly is quote integration, and what do we mean when we say that in class? And so what we're talking about is the idea of you writing an academic paper. Perhaps you are writing an interpretation of some sort of literary text. Maybe you are writing some sort of document-based question where you are asked to synthesize information after reading or viewing a bunch of different texts into a new creation, so some sort of an essay. Perhaps you are writing to defend a claim, your position on a topic, or if we're writing an essay, you're defending a thesis, so your position on a topic. And what we're trying to do in all of those scenarios is to convince your audience of something, whether your idea is valid, that your position has some merit, that your interpretation of a symbol in a text is valid, or that you have synthesized the information in a meaningful and effective manner. Perhaps you're trying to be persuasive in all of these things. So not just convincing them that you have a point or that your ideas are valid, but that you are trying to convince your audience to do something. Usually in academic writing, that means just believe you or see your point. But perhaps this is the idea of some sort of physical call to action, encouraging someone to recycle more or less, someone to drive their car more or less. You're trying to be persuasive, and so to form that argument, you are pulling from different texts to offer support for your reasoning. Because we are pulling from other texts, both in terms of their ideas and their words, we need to cite those. We need to give credit to the original authors. And so the idea of pulling information from other texts into your own writing is important because your claims, thesis statements, attempts to be persuasive aren't valid just because you say so. Just because you say that you should have the car this Friday night because you are 16 and have your license is probably not going to convince your parents enough that you are worthy of that you're going to drive safely. And so you may need to provide more evidence of why you would be a good candidate for driving the car this Saturday night. So you might have to pull from other texts. Maybe you have to cite evidence of your safe driving record. Maybe you need to cite evidence of your completion of a safe driving course. And so if you are pulling information from other texts to put into your own creation, essay, whatever, you must give credit to those original documents. You must tell your readers where your information is coming from. Yes, it is your argument. You are crafting it, you are shaping it, but you're getting information from other sources. You must tell your new reader where that information comes from. Go ahead and think of our paragraph structure, which if we stretch this out becomes our essay structure. If you stretch this out more, it becomes your extended essay structure. And many times we've talked about this in class, this has become our graduate work structure. I mean, basically, we have intro, body, and conclusion, and that body section needs to spread out or shrink based on how long we are writing or how complicated our attempt to prove something actually is. But if you look at our structure, you're going to start off your text with some sort of claim, some sort of argumentative point. Then you're going to give your reasons in the yellow sections. But where did those reasons come from? This is where you're probably going to have to use other texts to help justify your thinking. So if you wanted to say, for your claim, I should be able to take the car out on a Saturday night, and your first point as to why you should be able to take it out is that you are 16 years old, that's probably not enough. We need to go and provide some evidence of why being 16 should allow you to take the car. So maybe you need to cite a study done by the Automotive Retailers of America or something that concurs and shows that being 16 is an appropriate age where kids are safe. And then you need to analyze that and explain, how do the words in this report apply to you, and how does that apply to you, and how does that fit into the reasoning behind you being able to take out the car on a Friday night. And then you would move on to your next point. Another reason why you should take out the car is because I have completed a safe driving course. Your evidence, Might be that you have quoted from the instructor of that course. Yes, Johnny should be able to take out the car on Friday night because he was, quote, top of the class in our defensive driving course. And then you analyze that. Exactly how does being top of the class show that you are capable as a driver and that you should be able to take out the car on Friday night? And then, of course, we always like to speak in groups of 3, so you would have to make one more point. You would have to use some citing from some outside text to support your point. You would then analyze and connect it, and then ultimately you would offer a conclusion. Now, like we've said, this structure works for paragraphing. If we stretch that out, each point evidence analysis cluster becomes a body paragraph or perhaps a body section. And if you're writing longer papers for college or graduate work or whatever, you can stretch that out farther. The point is, you need to offer an intro, body, and conclusion, but you also need to show why your claims are valid and that your ideas are being pulled from other sources. These are the things you're going to have to cite. And so just to say it a little bit more explicitly, looking at those point evidence analysis elements, you can see number 1, the yellow, this is where you're going to state your thinking. Number 2, this is where you're going to state a quote or a paraphrase that made you think what you thought. And then number 3, and this is always the hardest part for students, you must show why that quote or paraphrase made you think what you thought. That analysis section, while it may look to be, just because of our graphic organizer, about the same length as the evidence, that's not necessarily so. This is where you must delve in, really explain yourself, explain your reasoning, make your point clear, and tie that into not only the quote that you use to spur your thinking, but also how that makes you think what you think. Ultimately, how do we do citations? What do we do? So the first step would be if you're going to borrow ideas or words from another text and put them in your own essay. Notice, ideas and words. So if we borrow either one, we have to cite them. Number 2, we're going to cite these in the body of the text. We'll call these in-text citations. Additionally, we need to cite these ideas and words at the end of our text or essay. And so this is called a works cited or a bibliography page. And then finally, and this is more of the style piece, we need to smoothly integrate these borrowed words or ideas into our essay. We don't want to use the dreaded quote bomb, where we just say, hey, I should be able to use the car this weekend because I'm 16. Quote, 16-year-olds are good drivers, end quote, and then walk away. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Where did that quote come from? Who said it? What was the context they were saying it in? Additionally, how does it actually help your argument? You must do a lot of what we will call framing of these quotes to seamlessly integrate the words or the ideas into your essay. And again, we'll show you multiple ways in which to do that. So to expand on each one just a little bit, the first rule is that if we borrow ideas or words, we must cite them. And so for borrowing ideas, usually we put those into our papers as paraphrases, meaning we've read something, we've thought about what it meant, and we have put it into our own words, and those words go into our paper. We're borrowing an idea. We didn't necessarily come up with the idea of things like gravity. We're borrowing the idea. We must give credit to where that original idea came from. Additionally, if we borrow direct words from any sort of source or text, we must give credit for those direct words also. We probably did not write the eloquent wording of Hemingway or Maya Angelou. And so if we're borrowing their words and putting them into our paper to help justify our point, we must cite those. Please notice when we say things like take quotes from an original text, that does not necessarily mean dialogue. Oftentimes students say, you know what, there was nothing that characters said that I wanted to say in my own paper, so I didn't cite anything. That's where we get a little confused. And so whenever we borrow any words from an original text, we must quote those, meaning put quotes around them, and then cite them. Number 2, immediately following where we have placed in a borrowed idea or we have placed in borrowed words, we must cite them in the text. And these are what we call in-text citations. We use MLA formatting at our school. And MLA formatting requires that after a writer has borrowed an idea or borrowed words from an outside text, that writer must cite them right there in the text. And what that means is that you put a small nod to the original author and text right in your paper. So at the end of your borrowed material, you put a citation in there. Usually it's the author's last name and some sort of page number in parentheses at the end of your sentence. And then that is followed by a period. We need to do that so that the reader can know immediately that this stuff was borrowed from some other text. Then the reader can look at your in-text citation and say, hey, if I really want to know more about this, I can use that in-text citation to refer me to the full text citation on the last page or the works cited page, and then I could look up that text myself. That's why we need to do this. It allows other researchers and readers to find more information for themselves based on the work that we as writers have done. Rule number 3 in terms of citation, not only do we need to cite in the body of our paper, but we must then cite it in a more full manner at the end of our essay. And this is called a works cited page. There is a technical difference between a works cited page and a bibliography, not something we're going to split hairs with here at our level. But a full works cited page lists every single text that we have used and referenced and pulled ideas and words from in our paper. And rule number 4 isn't necessarily a rule, it is more a guideline than a rule, but it deals heavily with the style of how you integrate quotes. And the idea that we are always pushing is that these quotes and these ideas that you're borrowing must be smoothly integrated into your writing. We call it framing. We don't just quote bomb something. We don't just take out 5 words from the original, put quotes in it, and then slam it into our paper. We need to smoothly integrate those words. We need to keep the flow of our own essay so that it sounds very smooth and flowing in terms of what is our wording and our analysis, and then when we are pulling in outside information. But how do we pull those ideas and those quotes and then integrate them grammatically into complete sentences into our essay? The question always comes up, well, why do I have to cite stuff? Like, who cares? The base level is, if you are taking other people's ideas or other people's words and putting them into your own work and passing them off as your own thoughts or words without citing them, that's plagiarism. In the academic world, that's a big no-no, because it seems like you are saying things that you didn't come up with, and that's not okay. I mean, if you did come up with something like, say, gravity or the fundamental theory of relativity or something, then awesome. It's yours. You get to claim it. You get to write about it. But since we probably didn't, then we need to give credit to the original authors and researchers who did work before us. We have to. It's not negotiable. You can't say, well, I'm kind of tired and man, I've done a lot of citations, so I'm just going to stop. No, every time you borrow ideas or words and you got smarter because of them, and then you put them into your work, you must give credit to the original person's work. A secondary reason why we need to give credit for these things is that our paper doesn't sound correct. It sounds immature and it sounds cheesy. And this goes more with the framing part than the citing part. The citing internally and with a works cited page will help avoid plagiarism. But the framing of quotes and how we integrate those, if we don't do it smoothly, it sounds like an elementary school effort. We're just throwing something in there. It's like, we know we need to pull in a quote to help defend our point or our theory, but we're doing it in a really poor way. And so we want to eliminate that immature writing by showing you guys sentence frames, ways that you can transition between your own wording and writing and then the words and writing of somebody else that you are integrating into your own papers. Adding that framing really helps ramp up the maturity and the sophistication of your own paper. And when you write in a more sophisticated manner, your argument is more clear, you're more likely to persuade, you're more likely to sound like you're making a valid point. And if you're communicating clearly and effectively, your message is transferred. And that's the goal of academic writing, to transfer your ideas and make them clear to somebody who isn't you. So that's about it for our first podcast on quote integration. Our goal here was to talk more about the theory of why you need to do it and to give you a hint as to some of the locations of how you're going to cite your papers. Again, we have more podcasts in this series, and these will talk more specifically about exactly where a citation goes and exactly how that links into a works cited page. And again, another podcast on how we can frame our words and our ideas that we've borrowed into our own paper. As always, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, go ahead and bring those in the class, and we will get those shored up and go from there. Thanks a lot.